You're listening to The Endless Party with your hosts,
Megan Elijah Armstrong. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Endless Party.
Yeah, we're glad you're here.
Today's episode is very exciting, and it's something
It's a long title.
Yes, it's a long title, but something I'm very passionate about talking about because this has plagued me for a long time. And anyway, so let's just jump into it. This is the I'm in a relationship and the person won't change party. How many times have you been talking with any individual or even been very upset yourself because you are in a relationship and you feel like you are doing all that you can and that the other person just won't change? How many times? How many conversations have you had with people about this?
I think it's a million, right? Like, it's nearly every single person that I know.
Yeah, everybody. I think this is something everyone struggles with where...
Well, and we're not even talking about just, like, intimate relationships like boyfriend, girlfriend. We're talking about relationships in general, right? We're not just saying that I have to be a romantic relationship.
No, I'm talking about any relationship. Mm-hmm. A relationship with a parent, a relationship with a sibling, a relationship with a friend, a relationship with a boss, a relationship with a coworker, like any relationship. Mm-hmm. I do want to make one quick disclaimer to this episode too, and that is if you are in a relationship that is toxic and that is abusive and that is not a good situation, then I hope that you will remember that you will only tolerate the amount of abuse from another person that you give to yourself, and you'll remember this principle and that you will get out, because there is
just get out of the relationship.
A time and a place to
fight
for
a relationship and like work on it, but that's not one of them.
But there's also a time and a place to change yourself and to get yourself out of that relationship, and I believe that you'll know if you are in one of those situations.
It's very obvious to know.
They're doing you harm emotionally, physically, in any way, then
leave.
Okay. But if you are in a different kind of relationship, like, for example, a relationship with a family member or a boss, and that person won't quote-unquote change, then we have some insight for you. So I think that the first thing that's important to recognize is there's this principle and there's this idea that you should be in relationships that are win-wins, right? Where in relationships there shouldn't be compromise, there should be what's called collaboration. Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about this a little bit, Elijah?
Yeah, for sure. So it all goes back to this win-win, win-lose, lose-win situation, right? So a collaboration is a win-win for everybody. So if you compromise, you actually both win and you both lose. So for example, let's say I want to take a vacation to the mountains and Meg wants to go to the beach. Well, a compromise would be we spend 2 days in the mountains and then we spend another 2 days at the beach. Right, so we both get a little bit what we want, but we don't get the full week vacation at our destination that we so choose. So that's a compromise. We both compromise a little, and so we both win and we both lose, right? Or you collaborate, and it says, hey, you know what? We could probably make 2 vacations work this year. I'm totally fine if I put mine off until, 6 months from now, and we can go to the beach for a week this week, Yeah. And then blah, blah, blah. So that's more of a collaboration. You both win and you both get exactly what you want.
Absolutely.
Okay. And there's a lot of different scenarios. It's not just a compromise and a collaboration. There's also an aggressor who just wins all the time. And then I can't remember the other term, but basically you're a doormat and you just lose all the time. Right? Okay. So you just accept it. And so the whole idea behind a relationship is that you should never have to compromise. You should never have to give. Give, yes, but you should never have to basically...
give up.
Yeah, just give up what you desire.
Yeah.
Right? So if it's a healthy relationship, you need to collaborate, and you both need to come out on top. You both need to win.
Right. What's super interesting is that what is it called? A compromise is normally not a win-win situation, even though everyone makes it sound like it. Ultimately, the two people in the relationship are losing.
Well, yeah, it's a win-lose for both people.
If we had to spend 2 days in the mountains and then travel all the way to the beach and spend 2 days at the beach, well, I'm going to be angry that we're only spending 2 days at the beach, and Elijah might be upset that we're only spending 2 days in the mountain. And then we might both be stressed that we have to pack up in the middle of this trip and change destinations. So ultimately, that compromise didn't even really work out in our favor.
Well, yeah. So like I said, you both win a little and you both lose a little.
Yeah.
Like that's the whole point behind it, right?
Right. So when you are in these relationships with people, what you want to seek out is this win-win. You want to come to this third agreement where it's not my way and it's not your way, but it's our way.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to come to this understanding with people that that you both are okay with. So the example of that Elijah gave, where it's like, oh, actually, we have more time this year, so why don't we spend a week in the mountains and a week at the beach? And I'm happy to go to the mountains later because it would make sense with the season. And so in that situation, we came to a completely different agreement, that allowed us to both win.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really important too, because when you're putting yourself in these situations and in these relationships, it's also important to recognize that sometimes usually what's better is that there's either no deal or a win-win. So for example, if you are with a boss or a friend or something and you're in kind of a sticky situation and you guys can't come up with a third agreement, that's fine. But then instead of a compromise or someone winning and someone losing, you can come to what's called a no deal. And that is when you guys just both say, well, I guess we're just going to agree to disagree, and this just isn't going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's so much power in that, because it saves you from stepping in these situations with people that could be really, really sticky.
Well, and mainly where that comes to. So I want to make a couple things clear here. So first of all, when it comes to marriage, so many people say you need to compromise. That's the biggest lie.
Don't compromise.
It's an absolute lie. So if you have relatives, family members, friends, or anything that basically tell you, when you get married, you just need to learn how to compromise. It's like, no, that's if I cussed, I would say that's BS. It's a lie, right? Because I've never once had to compromise in my marriage, and neither has Meg.
No.
Right? It's a collaboration. We decide what's best for us, and we decide how we're going to pursue certain things, right? So that's the first part I wanted to get out of the way. Second part, if you are in a healthy marriage, you never have to do the no deal.
Nope.
Realistically.
No.
You usually collaborate, you usually discuss, and you come to a win-win agreement. That's just how it works. The no deal is normally when it comes with all the other relationships that we were talking about, with friends, with family members, with bosses and such, right? So, for example, let's say for whatever reason, my family wants to go on a vacation. And they invite us, and we just say, you know what, we can make it work if we go this week. And they're like, well, we can't do that week, so it has to be this week. So instead of trying to compromise my entire life and trying to work around it, that's when you say, you know what, we love you guys, but unfortunately, we just can't make it work this year. And that's it. That's the no deal process. It doesn't have to be this thing where it's I blow up in your face.
No.
I'm just not going to do this because it's not good for me, right? It's a very positive thing, because you're saying yes to you and what's best for you and your family potentially, and no to what's not best for you and your family.
Right.
That's the whole process.
And on the flip side, the people who are going to go visit are also going to be better off, because if we were there, would we really be able to be our best selves, to be kind, to be nice,
you'd
and
be
to
thinking,
contribute to the whole?
actually I shouldn't have took this week of work off.
Right.
For XYZ.
Right. I think something that's so important to remember too with this principle is that the greatest way to quote unquote change, but it's not change, but to influence another person, it actually has nothing to do with the other person, but it has everything to do with you.
Yeah.
And it has everything to do with how you are going to handle the situation and how, you are going to respond. And it's just that cliche that everybody says. It's like, I can only change myself. And it's like, well, that's actually true. There's a reason why people say that all the time. When you're in a relationship with someone and the other person won't change, it doesn't mean that you have to give up on who you are and lose. But it means it is probably going to require you to probably change your way of thinking and change the way that you're going to go about this situation without a cost to yourself and what you believe in.
One of my communication professors in college, he had this saying, I can't even remember exactly, but basically there's three big rules when it comes to change. And he basically says, number 1, you can change. And then he goes, number 2, you can't change anybody else. And then he goes, number 3, good news, you can change. Right? And so it's just this whole understanding that it's like, look, like there are going to be people and situations in your life that you don't appreciate. And there's not a single thing that you can do about the people or the situation. But you can do something about you. You can do something. You can leave the situation. You can get out of the relationship. You can better yourself so that certain things don't bother you, right? So like that's the whole process behind this. It's like in relationships, don't seek to change another person because it doesn't work.
It never
God cannot even do it.
No.
Like you have to be like, this is, I've said this to Meg a few times, but the greatest miracle in the world is not moving a mountain, walking on water, or raising the dead. The greatest miracle is a change of heart. And that's just because that means somebody was willing to change themselves. And those people have to be 100% willing to do it. If not, then they won't change, right? You can go move a mountain. Like, take a shovel, start moving it, right? But, like, you can't change a person unless they choose to themselves. And so that's what's cool about this understanding is it just puts that responsibility back on yourself. I mean, and that's some of the things that we've talked about in the past podcasts. It's like, no pity parties. Like, take ownership and take responsibility for the relationships and the people that are in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. There's two things I want to talk about. The first one is, there comes a time and a place too. And this came from a book Elijah read. And there comes a point too where you can choose to accept the person as they are, or you need to tell them bye-bye. And in this situation, we've noticed that this principle is normally with family members, not with your spouse. I'm talking about like your extended family members, where there comes a point in time where, you just kind of got to accept them as where they are and where they're at, or you have to tell them goodbye. And in the case of family,
you got to just accept them.
Usually you have to just accept them.
You don't want to be a rat. Like,
you don't want to rat them all off.
Yeah.
The next thing I wanted to talk about, so this comes from my background and my studies in college within marriage and family therapy and family science. And I bring this up because I think it's really important. And the most important relationship that you can ever invest in is the relationship with your spouse. And a trusting, effective marriage is one of the most beautiful and powerful relationships in this life. It far surpasses any other relationship I've had with any other individual, and it is always worth the effort, and it is always worth your own change of heart to, make the relationship thrive.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyways, so the greatest investment of your time in terms of into your relationships, I would say, is 100% with your spouse.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. there's nothing more fulfilling than being able to have a very successful marriage, because everything kind of stems from that, right? Like, I mean, if you chose to get married in the first place, there's a few factors. Obviously, you didn't say bye-bye, right? If you don't learn how to change and really just fix yourself, and this includes both parties, right? In a marriage, you can't be the only one to
You
change.
both have to change.
Like, you both have to be willing to change, or it's not going to work. But here's what's interesting. Out of all the marriages that I've ever seen in my entire life, I have never seen a single marriage or a single so-called successful person um, in a miserable marriage.
No.
Like, people can be wealthy, they can have it all, they can have their big nice house, their nice cars, their nice toys, go on grand vacations, but yet they're all just seeking something that could easily be found in their marriage if they just fix their marriage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the reason why I bring this relationship up is because I just have a couple kind of theories and principles that I learned within my studies that I want to share. And the first thing is, what makes a marriage ultimately successful is that you have two independent people. Myself as an individual and Elijah as an individual, we're both independent. But together we have created this interdependent relationship where we are two independent people who have come together and have learned how to synergize and really help each other to become the best versions of ourselves. Mm-hmm. But that had to start with us finding our own independence and me knowing exactly who I was outside of this marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Part of my identity is, of course, being a wife, but it's just a part of it.
And it doesn't have to be your entire identity.
Yes, and Elijah and I talk about this all the time, and it's not sad, but it's like, if we talk about if the other were to die, yes, of course, the other spouse would grieve and be heartbroken, and I would never want that in the entire world. But there is this security in knowing that both of us would be okay. We would be able to move forward. We would be able to depend on ourselves to, move forward and make it work. But of course, we would rather, and we choose every day to live together and to have this interdependent relationship because it's way better than ever being single.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So when you have two independent people, like I said, you can have an interdependent, synergistic couple, and that is so healthy. But something I really want to explain too is when you have a dependent person and an independent person, or you can kind of get into these really unhealthy, kind of scenarios. And within family science, it was called the doormat versus the aggressor. And so what happens is, if you have someone who's dependent and someone who's independent, the aggressor will always kind of bully the doormat into submission, and that creates a very unhealthy relationship. And I would like to point out too that while all the blame may initially be cast onto the aggressor, that they are just, rude and not, it's all their fault, actually it can equally be put on the doormat who isn't standing up for themselves, who isn't independent, who isn't fighting for what they believe in, and who is submitting time and time again, to this aggressor. And then there's also this other unhealthy relationship. It's called a hero versus a victim, and that's when one spouse is always the hero, one spouse is always the victim. It's again an independent and dependent situation, but it also creates this unhealthy dependence on each other. The hero actually depends on the victimized spouse for their just to feel good about themselves. They have to save their spouse, and the victim depends on the hero to always pull them out of scrapes and to make them feel loved and worthy when they should get that from themselves. Anyways, so I just wanted to explain those scenarios because I think just to highlight the point that the best thing you can do in a relationship is to change yourself, and the more independent you become, the better it helps everything around you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's really what we wanted to talk about today, is just this understanding of get out of the relationships that are toxic for you, but also recognize that the ones that you can't change, that you just need to accept, family members, friends, loved ones like that, and then, be the change that you want to be, right?
First, change yourself.
Yeah, start with yourself. And so that's really this entire premise of the I'm in a relationship and people won't change party.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
We really appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
Please come back and
Sweet.
please tell somebody else about this podcast. That would really help us out.
Perfect. Until next time, guys.
Okay, bye.
Bye. You've been listening to The Endless Party. Please feel free to join us over at our website, theendlessparty.com, for more of our content. Also, we would love to hear from you. Leave some comments and let us know what you're interested in us talking about.
Seriously, like, subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, whatever it is the platform says to do, so that we can keep partying together.